This Notebook LM video explores the shocking accusations faced by early Christians in the Roman Empire and how they became targets of hostility for nearly 300 years. Pagans accused Christians of cannibalism, incestuous orgies, atheism, treason, and even causing natural disasters. These charges often came from misinterpretations of Christian practices.
Have you ever stopped to think about why the early Christians, the ones famous for the phrase, "look how they love one another," were so brutally persecuted by the Roman Empire for almost 300 years? Well, it turns out it wasn't just because of their beliefs. No, they were hunted down as dangerous criminals. So let's dive in and take a look at their official rap sheet. Just look at this list. This isn't some minor disagreement. Christians were being charged with cannibalism, incestuous orgies, atheism, treason, even causing natural disasters. I mean, it sounds completely insane, right? So what on earth was actually going on here? And that's really the big question we're going to unpack here. Were they really guilty of any of these shocking crimes? Or was there something else going on? Something maybe a little more strategic happening behind the scenes? All right, let's start by tackling the most outrageous accusations head on. Because as you're about to see, a lot of this stuff boils down to some truly wild misunderstandings and, some pretty nasty, deliberate rumors. First up on the list, the charge of cannibalism. And I'm not kidding. The Romans genuinely believed that behind closed doors, Christians were involved in some kind of ritual murder and were, eating human flesh. So where in the world did this horrifying idea come from? Well, it was a classic case of words being taken completely and totally out of context. Christians talked about their most sacred ritual, the Eucharist, using phrases like eating the body and drinking the blood of Christ. Now, if you're an outsider and you're not allowed into these secret meetings, you can see how that would sound. Pretty bad. And this really shows the massive disconnect. What the Romans heard was a literal gruesome act. But what Christians actually meant was a deeply symbolic ceremony. Eventually, Christians were able to explain that, no, it was just bread and wine, and this particular accusation started to fade away. But man, the damage was already done. Okay, next up is the equally shocking charge of gross immorality. We're talking incest and secret nighttime orgies. Again, the Romans were totally convinced that Christians were engaged in some seriously widespread sexual deviancy. And just like the cannibalism charge, the explanation is all about misunderstood language. See, Christians called each other brother and sister to show they were part of a new spiritual family. And they also held these communal meals called agape, which is just the Greek word for love. So when Romans heard about these brothers and sisters getting together at night for love feasts, well, their imaginations ran wild in the worst possible way. All right, this next one is going to sound like a complete contradiction. Atheism. How could a religious group, of all people, be accused of not believing in any gods? This one really gets to the heart of a huge cultural clash. The Roman world was polytheistic. I mean, gods were everywhere. And the way you proved you worshipped them was by having statues and temples. Christians, on the other hand, refused to worship these gods and had zero idols of their own. So, from a Roman point of view, it was simple. No statues, no gods. Therefore, you must be an atheist. Okay, so we've debunked some of the craziest rumors. But does that mean Christians were completely innocent of everything they were accused of? Well, not quite. Turns out, some of the charges actually had a kernel of truth to them. That's right. Of all the bizarre things on that rap sheet, the one charge they were definitely guilty of was disrupting the economy. And believe me, in the Roman Empire, that was a very, very serious crime. Just think about it for a second. When people converted to Christianity, they stopped buying animals for sacrifice at pagan temples. They stopped buying meat from those sacrifices. And they definitely stopped buying all those little silver shrines and idols made by local craftsmen. In some towns, the growth of the church caused a real economic downturn for anyone tied to the pagan religious industry, and that created real, tangible resentment. But this is where the story gets really, really interesting, because these accusations of immorality, they weren't just a pagan attack on Christians. Oh no, this was a weapon used by everyone, and Christians were giving as good as they got. It was basically a case of fighting fire with fire. Pagans accused Christians of all sorts of secret, immoral stuff. So what did Christian writers do? They pointed right back at the pagans' own religion. They described the Roman gods as adulterers, liars, and total deviants. They called pagan festivals nothing more than drunken, out-of-control parties. It was the exact same tactic, just aimed in the other direction. And this reveals the crucial point. This was never just about simple misunderstandings. It was a deliberate strategy. Accusing your opponent of some kind of extreme immorality was the single most effective way to draw a line in the sand, to define us as the good, pure ones, and them as corrupt and dangerous. You know, there's actually a word for this whole practice: heresiology. It's the study of heresy, and a huge part of it was attacking your opponents not just on their beliefs, but on their morality. And get this tactic wasn't just used against outsiders like the pagans. Christians used it with ruthless efficiency against each other. Let's take the Gnostics, for example, a rival early Christian movement. Mainstream church leaders accused them of being these radical sexual libertines, claiming they believed that since your spirit was pure, you could do whatever you wanted with your body. But, and this is amazing, when we actually found the Gnostics' own texts, we discovered the complete opposite. Most of them teach extreme self-denial and a total rejection of the physical world. The accusations were just propaganda, pure and simple, designed to wipe out a rival. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, it's that this ancient pattern of accusation, it tells us something really fundamental about how human groups work, both back then and right now. Here's the bottom line. These charges of cannibalism and orgies and all this debauchery, they were almost never about finding the truth. They were a powerful rhetorical weapon, a tool used to justify persecution, to enforce social boundaries, and to define one group's identity by creating an other. It's a timeless blueprint, really. Step 1, you identify a group you want to target. Step 2, you accuse them of things that are secret, immoral, and totally shocking to everybody else. Step 3, you use those accusations to frame them as a threat to society itself. And finally, step 4, in doing all that, you get to define your own group as the righteous, moral defenders of order. And that really brings us to the final thought. This ancient playbook for creating an enemy, it didn't die out with the Roman Empire. This tactic of othering a group by accusing them of secret, immoral behavior is one of the most powerful and persistent strategies in all of human history. Which leads to the real question, doesn't it? Where do you see it happening right now?